A lot of talk this morning about content and who owns content. And we have a really, really good panel coming out, led by Nat Ives, who is reporter and editor at Advertising Age. And he's joined, as you can see, by a very large panel that's going to be up here. And let me tell you a little bit about the people. One is Elena Sukacheva, who's Managing Director, Global Content Solutions at The Economist. Joining her will be Jimmy Maymann, CEO of the Huffington Post. Along with Jimmy will be Mark Renshaw, Global Chief Platforms and Partnership Officer of Leo Burnett and ARC Worldwide. Along with him will be Jason Hill, Global Director of Media Content and Strategy at GE. And last but not least will be Desai, Managing Partner, Account Director, and the GE Account Lead at MEC. So they'll be up here. As you can see, it's a big group, several hours. Let's get them out here. Guys, come on out. Nat, why don't you bring your illustrious team?
Hi, everybody. Welcome back from lunch. Everybody awake? Blood sugar back up? Yes, good. I'll take that as a yes. We are here because as consumers get more and more ways to avoid traditional advertising and get better at staring straight through it in the case of some online ads, content is becoming increasingly essential for marketers. So there's a gold rush on to make that content. We're going to sit here and decide who wins that gold rush today, or at least we'll talk about who might want to or why and in what contexts. But first, to get us started, there's new research that bears on this that Elena from The Economist is going to present. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you found?
Sure. Well, first of all, I need to apologize. I got sick, so I lost my voice. It's back, but if I sound a little bit squeaky, please bear with me. So the content, who owns the content? I think more and more we hear that brands became publishers, and we take it as an accepted truth. And indeed, marketers do produce a lot of content. Based on some estimations, over 30 million pieces of content gets produced daily by marketers. And the investment in the content marketing is also increasing. It's one of the few areas of marketing that's actually growing. Grew last year and will grow this year. However, I think you agree that there are very few content programs that actually do engage with the audience and meet the audience engagement that the marketers intend. And we started investigating why it's the case. I think fundamentally there's a philosophical difference between how publishers think about the content, how marketers think about the content. For publishers, audience is at the center, and we measure our success based on how many subscriptions, for example, we sell. For marketers, brand is still in the center. So to investigate this dichotomy, we interviewed 500 global marketers, 500 global CEOs, and 500 global millennials on how they consume the content and how they create the content as well. We focused specifically on the business-related content. We excluded news, we excluded video. Well, no, we did not exclude video, I apologize. We excluded entertainment and video for the entertainment purposes, but we looked at everything that's business-related content. So what we found out, that marketers really miss the mark when they communicate with the audience. Virtually all of them try to align the content with the products and services that they sell. Some of them, well, majority of them, even mention that product and service in the content, and they measure their success based on how many leads they generate or how much sales they create. However, if they look at the audience, they absolutely hate to be sold to. And they look at the business-related branded content for the business insights, for some of the ideas for their business problems, for the competitive insight. And if they smell just the whiff of being sold to, they dismiss content right away, even if it has interesting insights. Some other things that we found out that I think you will find somewhat unusual or controversial. How many times you've been at the client meeting and the client will tell you, I want the video, and I want it to be on YouTube, and I want it to generate 10 million views by the end of the week. What we found out that for business-related content, 75% of the audience actually prefers text and even audio, not even video, which is not surprising because most of the time they consume this content at work. And if you spend a lot of time at work watching videos, even this fun and exciting video of the cat playing the piano, I think some of your colleagues might start questioning your motivation, even if you have a corner office. As a matter of fact, we did not find too many differences between C-suite and millennials in terms of the format of the content that they prefer. It's articles and it's research reports. And videos are very, very distant, number 10 for global C-suite and number 3 for millennials in the preference of the format. Another interesting thing that we found out is that global executives spend more than 4 hours a week on the branded content. So they can go deeper into this content and they can consume pieces like white papers that can be 7,000 words long, while millennials have much less patience and spend on the content roughly 3.5 or less hours a week on the branded content. Another strong preconceived notion is that the mobile is the way to go, and that's the way to communicate with the audience. And yes, absolutely, it's a very important channel. However, still, the majority of the audience engage with the branded content through laptops and desktops, and smartphones and tablets are relatively low. Interestingly, C-suite engage with the smartphone and tablets a little bit more than millennials. It might be counterintuitive until you remember that the C-suite probably travels more and as a result consume more information through smartphones. Finally, we were very interested in how audience selects the content with which to engage. And both of the groups said that the most important thing is the trustworthiness of the source. But the trustworthiness is defined somewhat differently. The C-suite executives, the older generation, still rely on media outlets, established media outlets, to signal the trustworthiness of the content, while millennials go after the recommendation of their colleagues and also the social networks. So next time when you talk to your clients and clients ask you for your YouTube video and to be distributed through the smartphone, I think it's for us to kind of ask them the question why they think it's important.
Thank you. Really interesting stuff, actually. We're going to come back to many of these details, but I also want to get the panel involved and talk about where each of you sit in the content gold rush right now. Mark, creative agencies are known for a certain kind of content traditionally, but you're also very active in innovating in content. Do you help position creative agencies, or at least your own, in the content wars right now?
Yeah, sure. So I think what's interesting about it is most people would think that the creative agencies would want to own the content, that we have to own this battle. Well, I think there's a bit of a reframe there in how we think about ownership. The first is I think we don't really talk about owning content. We talk about making it ownable or actionable. I think we need to be putting ideas out there and pieces of content that people can do something with. And then the second thing is, when we do put out great ideas, and that's what we're known for as a creative agency, I think we make content that's not just owned, but we transfer ownership to people and other agencies and to clients. And I think when you move an idea from something small to something that's big and that has multiple dimensions and multiple voices, then you end up with content that is in ownership way. And that allows partnership, which I think is what the spirit of this conference is all about. And I think at the end of the day, we can't just create this stuff on our own. We need all of the data partners and the media partners and the publishers and the platforms, everybody working together. And I think there's some really great strides happening in that, but I think there's a lot more work to do about in truly working as partners.
Jimmy, as a publisher, what's the best approach to content creation? I mean, maybe you can talk about how you do it at Huffington Post, but I wonder about the margins on a pretty labor-intensive piece of work, whether maybe this is just the new table stakes more than anything else to get advertisers in the door, whether editors ought to be involved to really lend something that nobody else has, or whether you want to have specialist teams, content studios, and editors doing what they do best all day long.
There's a lot of questions in one question, but I'll try to get around it. But at HuffPost, I think, obviously, as we heard a second ago, brands and advertisers are about the brand, and we are about readers and creating experiences for our readers and creating the biggest possible audience. We obviously do that with content. We have our editors creating stories. Actually, we come out with 1,600 stories on a daily basis. Around 40–45% of those are created by us. So we don't, so the reason why I say that is because we don't have to create the stories as long as we feel that they fit the audience, the reader. And the same goes with with what we talk about here, the native, the branded programs. We have a HuffPost Partner Studio, which is basically an in-house agency with writers, with strategists, with salespeople that are out there servicing advertisers and brands. Because what we found was that a lot of them were not kind of ready to make that jump, but really understanding what it took to kind of get into this space. And the reason why we've done that is obviously, there's two things happening right now in the industry. There's kind of the shift to programmatic, so everything, traditional display going into machines. And then there's the premium side, which for me is really the branded content, the native advertising. And the reason why that is important for publishers is that if we're not able to create a business around that, our CPMs will be going downwards. And I think that as a publisher, that's obviously not something we're interested in, especially not if you're 100% advertising funded like HuffPost. So we've created this to really offset that trend. And so far, that's worked really well for HuffPost. We've seen over the last year, our CPMs, even though a lot of our inventory goes to programmatic, we've seen our CPMs increase by 44%. Our HuffPost Partner Studio, our native advertising and branded content now is a third of our revenue. And 2 years ago, we didn't do branded content and native advertising. So yes, it's cost money to create great content, but because you have a structure and we have a platform with more than 100 million readers, obviously we can create content, but we can also amplify messages. And when we do it in a respectful way to our audience, they're actually receptive to it. And I think that is really the thing here, is that it's about having the bigger brand purpose. As soon as you move out of the right-hand rail and into the content section, it's content, and that's what it says, and it should be content. And there's a trade-off with the reader. And obviously, I don't want to have something there that is 100% product focused. If that's what you want, stay in the banner, stay in the traditional units, because that's what the user will expect. But they don't expect it if you're in the content section. So I think that's how we try to work around it.
That's great. I think you very quickly answered all 5 of my questions at once.
I tried.
So very good. Tej, like creative agencies, media agencies are best known for certain skill sets. What do you contribute here?
Sure, it's a good question. We hope we contribute a lot. When I first got into the media agency world, which wasn't that long ago, I was always shocked at how we were sort of at the beginning and we were at the end, right? You're at the beginning because you're planning, you're negotiating, you're getting the best rates for your clients. But you're at the end because you're looking at reporting and metrics and optimization, making sure that the campaigns are delivering. And I always thought there was this white space in the middle that, as business partners managing all this media investment, there's a lot of dollars out there that we weren't really getting as involved in with traditional campaigns. So content creation for us, or content partnerships, are a gold mine in terms of learning and value add, because we're able to take the data and insights that we're looking at in terms of audience demographics and psychographics and learning who those behaviors and audiences are, looking even globally to say, okay, if there's insights that are coming out of certain markets on a plan that we work with GE, for example, where we're going across 20 markets around the globe, and really being able to use that to fuel the content creation. So if we're working with either an agency or with a publisher who's putting together blogs and infographics and articles, we're able to constantly, in a dynamic way, help improve that with the insights and the data that we have, rather than being sort of on that beginning and end of the spectrum, being able to kind of continue it. And I think to add, distribution is key too, because a lot of times we get so bogged down in the content creation and making it really appealing to the consumer and the audience, which is important. But then at the end of the day, if nobody's finding it, that's a big problem. So the media agency role in that as well is looking across all the partners that we have globally or even within a certain market and understanding where that content can live and where it can be complemented with other partners as well.
I really do take seriously the challenge posed by the title. I want to pick a winner. I want to say who owns content. But obviously the theme that emerges as you guys all talk is partnership. Maybe we could hear a little bit about what GE and The Economist and MEC have been doing over the past few years.
Sure. I mean, our partnership with The Economist for us is kind of a natural outgrowth of what we've been doing in the content space as a brand for the last 4 or 5 years. So for GE, who has a tremendous amount of thought leadership and really phenomenal stories to tell, we began creating a lot of our own content and really tried to move our brand marketing team from people who were just producing 30-second ads and print pages to actually thinking about how do we program as a brand. So we did all sorts of things in-house, like the GE show, like a masterclass series where we are explaining things like MRI technology and gas propulsion technology in a really relatable and sort of discoverable way that people can find. And we always saw sort of a role for our agencies as well, sort of still going out there and like, give us the TV ad, give us that sort of big kind of tier 1 creative. I think we started to come around to thinking about publishing partners in a different way, really around the same time that a lot of the companies like HuffPo, like the Economist Group, started to think about, we're no longer going out and just selling ads, we have a content studio, we're going to try to bring these capabilities to brand partners. And we thought that that was potentially a great marriage of the kinds of groups who have excellent editorial ability and can obviously and sort of naturally translate that into great storytelling for brands, as well bringing an audience to bear in a way that maybe we can't do through some of our own platforms or our own channels. So what we've created with the Economist Group is called Look Ahead, and it's sort of a daily look at technology and innovation that's told through infographics, through videos, through sort of long-form pieces that live natively on the site, as well as distributed across theeconomist.com and all of GE's platforms as well. And I think and we can get into this a little bit, this sort of proliferation of this and how much we're seeing of it now. But when we started this 3 years ago, I think it was one of the first, and I hope sort of one of the highest quality, as well as having this sort of daily cadence, so that we're learning, I think, and have a real appreciation for what publishers do when you sort of get into this space, and suddenly you really turn on the vacuum and have to feed it day in and day out if you want to go to market as a publisher.
I want to talk about some of what your research found because I thought it was so interesting. I mean, one of the points, of course, I think we're all well aware of, which is that content, marketer-driven content, exists at the end of the day to achieve something. There's goals there, and it's not just to entertain the reader or engage them. We're trying to do business here, but people don't like to be sold to. So what's the right way for content to do that job, but not do it so much that people don't even look?
Well, I think actually example of our partnership with GM and SC is a very good example to do that. As Jason mentioned, we do not do any heavy sell. If anything, Economist retains editorial control of everything that we publish. And at the center of the program is, what are the most interesting innovation stories that we can deliver to our audience on a daily basis? They are loosely aligned with the industries that GE is interested in. And that's basically the only alignment. And really the association that we try to generate is between the content and how interesting, exciting the content is for the audience, how much value it achieves for the audience, and that GE brings it to them. And I think the great role for MSC there is to make sure that they find distribution channels for this content beyond of what we can provide at The Economist. We have a good circulation, but definitely there are other powerful brands there that can utilize that content.
If I can add to that, I think this discussion about where it becomes relevant, I think, especially when we talk about branded content and content marketing and native advertising, it's very important to understand that trade-off with the reader, right? And I think that's re-engagement is the first step. And then it's not that you can't sell, but if that is what you're doing, then you need to do that. You need to go for the bigger brand purpose. And then the selling part, I think, that's really combining it with the more traditional units. You can still buy out the rest of the site and do all the things you want to do, but it is going for the high purpose. That is, at least on our platform, that's what works when brands are trying to go for those bigger things. We had a great campaign with Chipotle last year where they talked about food for thought, bringing that discussion to life and really articulating that in an interesting way. But obviously, doing that for the greater good of the brand and also extending it across other media. And that's obviously where other partners becomes important. It becomes the advertising agency becomes important, the media agency becomes important to kind of really amplify it across other channels.
Another key point in this research that you presented was that while many people in my demographic look at media brands for authority still, millennials are often looking to each other for authority. They're looking for communities. It's possible that millennials think they own content. And so I want to know what that means to the work that you guys are doing now. And I have a sort of side question, which is that permanent, or do millennials age out? I mean, is this community focus going to just grow and rise even as they age, or will they become more like me when they're older?
Well, I don't know that the two things are necessarily at odds with one another. I think that, for instance, we were one of the first brands on Instagram and found this sort of insight that actually And obviously there are users on Instagram beyond just millennials, but at the time we said this is a platform that's going out to millennials. There's actually sort of great beauty in big GE machinery. This is an excellent platform for us to create content for the brand and put it into that community. And what you're really doing there is, in some ways, you are handing over control because people can contribute to that. But they also really vote on the relevance and sort of worthiness of your content every second and every day. And so I think content creation for communities might look different than content creation for maybe more of a business decision maker space. But I think, and my colleagues up here from the media companies will be better off talking to this, but I think you're seeing the offering from some of our biggest media companies evolve, whether it's the sort of predictive algorithms or a curated set of content that lets you come in and have the reading and consumption experience that you want to have. It feels like the industry is sort of catching up with that. And so I'm not sure that necessarily we'll see millennials graduate to something. It will be that the industry will probably move along with them. But at the same time, I think the work that everybody here is doing is thinking about how to put content into those spaces, not have it be sort of two separate camps.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on that. I think this idea of millennials as a group is actually more of a mindset, and I'd like to think of myself as a millennial, even though I'm not. But I think that if we set our bars on what is going to be ownable or actionable by a millennial for anybody, for any audience, then you end up saying, well, what problem are you solving for them? What are you helping them with? And I think to that point before about people not wanting to be sold to, I think that's because you weren't giving them information that was going to help them. It's like selling me something that I'm not in the market for. And I think, if you link content to how people move through, the buying process, we have research that shows there's 12 steps and it varies by category. And if you know your category and you know where people are moving through the buying process and where their frustrations are, where their expectations are not being met, then you can provide content. It's like I see, you see retargeting, you see banner ads right now. You go to an e-commerce site, you look at a product, and then you see that pair of shoes across the internet for the next 3 days. Well, does that help me to move down the buying process? Probably not. But if I saw that there was a review about that product, or if I saw there was more information about how that's going to change my life, then I may go, well, that's interesting content. That actually moves me to make that more actionable, and it works for everybody. And I think if you're creating content that's not selling, then you're doing it wrong. I don't think we can have content over here that is selling and content over there that's not selling. We had the CMO panel up here before. They're under huge pressure and stress, right? They've got to drive the business and drive sales and the brand at the same time. So I don't think you can separate them out. And I think we can just set the millennials as that kind of high benchmark.
I agree with that. I think this, for me, is not so much about the millennials. It's more about how content consumption and media consumption has changed. If we just look, HuffPost is in May, we're 10 years old. And just over that period of time, how much consumption has changed and how people are accessing the content. Because obviously that's not only for us, it's really for the industry. When it started off, it was all about blogging, it was all about search. Then obviously social became huge and still is hugely important. Now kind of you're seeing the instant messaging platforms, you're seeing the likes of Snapchat launching Discover, you're seeing the hugely important Instagram and other things. And mobile is, of course, the next wave that's, again, totally transforming the business we are in. 18 months ago, 80% of our audience was coming to us via mobile, and now it's kind of close to 60%. And this is a shift that's as transformational as the shift we saw from print to digital. So I think, for me, those are more important things because we need to think about that not just as a publisher, but you need to think on that as an advertiser. How do you connect with your audience? If your audience suddenly is consuming it on new platform in a different way, how do you get into those platforms? We, as a publisher, need to think about that because suddenly I need to make sure that we have a distributed approach for our content because before they used to come to the destination. Right now we get, before we got 80% of our traffic directly on the destination, now we get 80% of our traffic across the ecosystem, across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those services. And I think if you're a brand today and you're building destinations, then obviously it'll be very, very difficult for you to connect, whether you're talking to millennials or you're talking to an older demographic.
I also think a slightly different opinion. Through this research, surprisingly, there was very little difference between C-suite and millennials and how they react to content or how they consume the content. And this trustworthiness of the brand and the source was probably one of the very few areas where there was a substantial difference. And I think some of it is driven by what environment those two groups grew up in. If we think about C-suite, it's probably on average age of 45 and older. They grew up in the environment where there were two types of press. There was a yellow press and there was a good quality press. So they rely on the good quality press for the information. Of course, they go through the recommendation of the colleagues. Of course, they look at the social networks, but it's not the number one measurement for them, and established media brand is. For millennials, they grew up in a completely proliferation of the different content sources, and I think as a result, for them, the brand name probably matters less. And for brands like Huffington Post or how myself, the Economist group, it's an important thing to keep in mind, and how can we reestablish ourselves back with that group.
I want to catch what you were going to say. I also want to enter our speed round of what's next.
Yeah, I was just going to say really quickly, in terms of redefining a target audience, we talked about what media agencies do, and I think, coming into it, you look at all these tools and things where you're like, here's your demographic, here's this. And when we, started working in the GE business, you think, okay, I'm looking at C-suite executives. And that quickly was turned upside down because you essentially define your audience by mindsets and behaviors, right? So if I'm looking in the Middle East, I might be targeting a 27-year-old entrepreneur who's, building some great company. But in China, I might be targeting someone who's a 60-year-old, government official. Yet they're consuming some of that similar content in the exact same space. So it's really redefining that whole audience and understanding what their mindsets and behaviors are, and not who they are as sort of a demographic, so to speak.
Well, we are running short on time, so I do want to try to see if everyone on the panel can offer up. We can go at this one of two ways. What worries you? Or maybe more optimistically, what's next? Who wants to start first with a prediction or a worry in the content sphere?
Yeah, I'll do a worry.
All right.
I think one of the things right now is there's this event's all about transformation. There's so much change out there that I think we have to be very careful that we don't throw away all of the great learnings that we have from hundreds of years about how to tell stories and how to communicate things to people and the craft involved in that. And I think we have to be very careful we don't throw all that away in pursuit of potentially a new platform or a new technology that on the surface may seem like it's game-changing, but in reality it relies on those same fundamentals to slightly transform. So I think in the race and the change and the confusion, we have to be very careful. And we can use data to do that, but I also think that there's some aspect of best practices that you should follow, and there's some aspect of best practices you should absolutely stay away from. Some of our best work has been done when we have completely walked away from all the best practices and created something totally new that's transformational. And I think there's a lot of talk in the industry about best practices and change, and you have to know when to follow which. And I think every brand, every category is very different, but there's a worry there for me.
That's a great point, especially as I hear sometimes publishers talking under their breath about the possibility of, the death of the homepage, or even willingly doing away with the homepage and just trying to live in the distributed web. I think that'd be fascinating to see. I also don't want to lose some of what we've learned along the way about publishing. Another worry or prediction?
Well, I would just build on what Mark said. I think that people still love a great story well told, and I think that especially since we're talking a little bit about the, native advertising, I think great stories can be told through native. I think it's also really easy to do a lot of crap in native, and so I think we're going to see a continued sort of raising quality imperative. And so just like the audience did with, maybe you could say, with digital display or other sort of interruptive forms of media, people will weed out what they don't want. And so hopefully what we'll see is brands and agencies and publishers partner more and more, as we'll see some really great storytelling. And some of the things that are being tried right now, maybe earnestly to see what works, and maybe knowingly a little bit shoddy, will hopefully fall away.
I actually have, I think, a worry and optimistic view of that. And I think the worry is, we all know about the banner blindness, which is a real problem. I think over time we will start seeing more and more content blindness, especially with those 30 million pieces created every day. It's impossible for all of them to be high quality. So I think, to Jason's point, on the optimistic side, we'll see more and more marketers actually releasing control over the messaging and focusing more on the audience, because ultimately that's the secret for creating impactful content.
Let's try to be optimistic. I think brand building has always been about storytelling. I think advertisers, agencies, media agencies know how to engage an audience. They've always been able to do that. As we talk about this shift into more branded content, content marketing, it's all about narratives. It's all about storytelling. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. I think you're in a great position to actually get in there and play an important role. And when it comes to the new platforms that are coming around, that's really where you need to embrace the change that is happening. It's happening very fast, and obviously you need to make sure you have people that have that social media mindset, that understand mobile, that understands video. But if you do that, I think you're in a great position to still be very relevant for advertisers.
I'll just say quickly, I know we're running short on time, but I think we're going to see the breaking down of borders and fluidity across borders. I mean, the beauty of content creation is that it really is boundless. And I think when you're working in a more traditional medium, you're running, an ad buy on NBC or whatever it might be, and that's very limited. But just having been around the world, most recently with GE and seeing some of these content partnerships, content's everywhere, and it doesn't have to be in regional languages or this and that. It lives and spreads and is distributed across borders. So anything we're creating here has, arms and legs that we probably never even dreamed of before.
All right, and a last stab at getting an answer to the question, who owns content creation? Can I get a show of hands? Anybody here own content?
We definitely
Yeah, all right, there we go. Thanks very much, you guys. You were a great panel. Really appreciate it.